let's bring on our good friend Wes Durham, friend of the program. We love having him on as he shares his insight about college basketball and Cuse basketball in particular. Wes, always great to have you on. How you doing today?
I'm great. Steve, Paulie, how are you? Sorry I'm running a little late.
It's okay.
I'm not going to blame it on Delta Airlines because it's not their fault. But I'm not. It's not their fault. I was a little slow to the draw here, and the phone started ringing the minute I got in the house. So I apologize to you guys.
No, we would wait for you all day, Wes. We love having you on. Go ahead, Paulie.
Wes, the last time I think I saw you in person, we were walking out of the Dome, and you said to me that's a good win for you guys after the Tennessee win, and it feels like it's been all downhill since then. What, from the outside perspective, what do you think's gone wrong with Syracuse this year?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen him in person since that night. How about that? ACC gets more bigger in terms of roster. I'm going to have a problem. There's going to be, I think I'm going to go to Charlotte week after next, Paulie and Steve, and I will not see Pitt in the regular season. I will not see Boston College in the regular season. Will not see Stanford in the regular season. Now I'll see Florida State on the last day of the regular season. So
I was going to say you're not missing much with a few of those teams.
A couple of those, right? Look, here's the thing. When Freeman came back, I thought all the pieces were in place, right? And I'm sure you guys did too. And then you had a bunch of close losses, correct? I mean, things that just didn't really fall the Orange's way for one reason or another. And now you've dealt some losses out. I mean, you dealt the loss to Cal, you dealt the loss to SMU. Then if you could have pivoted and picked up some of those earlier in the conference season, would have been a good thing. And probably would be a much different discussion than the one that is certainly permeating in Central New York right now. Look, I think they're still a decent basketball team. Unfortunately, they may also be a victim of a really big conference, guys. And I understand people are frustrated. You got every right to be frustrated. I live in Atlanta, where Georgia Tech has been to one NCAA tournament since 2010. One. Think about that. Yeah. That's kind of the basketball, and you've got a much broader scope basketball tradition than Georgia Tech does, who's been to 2 Final Fours. Syracuse has obviously been to a lot more, but I think we've got a couple of programs in the ACC, and I'm not trying to draw the analogy between Syracuse and Georgia Tech. I'm just using them because it's easy for this conversation. I think they're programs that are trying to find out exactly how you do this in the new world. And there is a certain way you have to do this in the new world, and it's different than the way it used to be, for sure.
Yeah, and along those lines, Wes, we've gotten some pushback on this show. At the beginning of the season, we looked at the roster and the talent. We said, you know what? Yeah, there's enough talent on this roster to make the NCAA tournament. And now as the season has played out, you look at where they sit, and you look at, Paulie and I were talking about the top 8 teams in this conference right now, and I'm just going to rattle them off. Duke, Virginia, Miami, NC State, Carolina, Clemson, Louisville, SMU. It's hard to argue that those aren't the top 8 teams in this conference in NIL, right? And so I feel like they can both be true. Yes, SU's roster was better. It was more competitive, but it's still not in that tier of where they need to be. As you just said, they're trying to figure it out. So, I mean, do you kind of agree with that that both things can be true, they can be better, but just not good enough? I mean, where do they kind of stack in your mind in terms of talent in this conference?
Steve, I think you're onto something, because this is – and I have a hard time with this sometimes. Being that I turned 60 last month, I have a real hard time. I remember what the old days were like, right? Before the money became one of the principal determinants in what was going to happen, right? And we have to remember that money does impact this. That's part of the reason it occurs, is the dollars that are being handed to the student athlete, or the athlete in this case. How long they're a student is up to them at the particular institution. I do believe the 8 schools you're talking about could very well be the top 8 teams in the league as it relates to money. And I don't think there's any getting around that, right? I mean, that's just what it is. You also look at the top 25 preseason football teams that have been released for 2026. How many of those? Like last year, it was thought that Ohio State and Texas Tech and maybe Georgia were north of $30-some-odd million with their football payrolls, right? Well, if it's going to take $30-some-odd million just for football payrolls, what's it going to start taking with basketball? Because, part of the situation that the ACC was afflicted with last year was there was a question about the amount of money being spent on some of the membership for basketball, right? And I think that's something we all have to understand, that this is not an endless well. There's not a salary cap here. There's not some television revenue pool that gets split up. It's a nice thought, but not everybody gets the same number. And the salary cap is different for everybody, right? That's the competitive nature of the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NBA and all those things. But in college athletics, there is no salary cap. So you can go to infinity and beyond, as Buzz Lightyear likes to say. And I think that's one of the things that's affected college basketball. Remember, there was and you guys probably had this conversation in your market only because of previous history and location. Remember, there was a thought about 18 months ago that the Big East, when the House settlement occurred, that the Big East was going to flourish in basketball because they didn't have football membership. Remember that?
Yes, we definitely had that conversation here. Yeah.
And look what's happened to the Big East.
Yeah.
I mean, just to show you, it still matters. Player evaluation counts. Coaching matters. And, oh, by the way, the money matters. Those are the three things that ultimately, I think, determine. Look, there have been really good players who don't make a lot of money, and there have been players that haven't performed at a level who've made a lot of money in college athletics. That's just the way this is going to be. And it's, I think, okay to get frustrated with it. But at the same time, if you're places that have proud traditions, such as Syracuse, this change is difficult. This has been a difficult time because this is not about the pride sometimes in the front of the jersey. It's about other things, and that's sometimes the struggle for folks.
Wes, what do you also make about the top four teams in the ACC seem to be at a different level also? And this year there's also been a ton of blowouts in games where, Louisville's beating NC State by 40, Duke is beating Syracuse by 37, and then almost 50 against Notre Dame the other night. What do you make of that?
Well, the bottom four, let me say the bottom four, of which one is going to go to Charlotte and the other three are going to sit at home. And today that would be Notre Dame, Boston College, and Georgia Tech. The bottom three, I to this day, NC State helped Georgia Tech win because they shot the ball so bad that day in Raleigh, okay? You look at Notre Dame's 3 wins, Boston College's 2 wins, things of that nature, how those wins have occurred. Those teams, I'm not sure financially or even in the neighborhood that they've got. Those 3 in particular, I'm not sure 4 maybe with Pitt. I'm not sure where Pitt's payroll is. I'm not as confident about Notre Dame, Boston College, and GT. But I know to your point, Stephen, Paulie, they're not in the top 8. They're not. It's just not where it is at those institutions. And I think I've been with you guys before where I said ultimately one day this is going to come down to somebody looking in the mirror and having a hard conversation with themselves about how much they're going to put in this, right? And I think that's part of the question here is how much are we going to put into this? What can be our return on the investment, if you will? And the blowouts are going to be just talent-based, Paulie, in my opinion. Look, Louisville shot the ball like Golden State the night they kicked NC State, okay? Let's be honest. Michael Brown had 45, for heaven's sakes. I watched I watched Virginia beat NC State last night by 29. So it's going to happen from time to time. But more often than not this year, we've gotten really good games. I mean, I think almost 35% of the games have been 5 or less or overtime in conference play. The home winning percentage is one of the lowest we've seen in the last 20 years in the ACC, maybe the lowest going into the last 10 days of the regular season. But, yeah, there are going to be some blowouts. And that's going to be just like you see, can I say this, Steve? Pro basketball, you're going to see that in pro basketball, right? So, one night, the Warriors might beat the Clippers by 51 or 36 or whatever the number is. So maybe we ought to get used to that a little bit in the ACC too. But more often than not this year, we've had really good games.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, you just said a moment ago that schools might have to, have some hard conversations and look themselves in the mirror. Is that kind of what they're doing at Wake Forest with Steve Forbes, where the results haven't been great, but they look at it and they say, you know what? We think he's a good coach. We realize the limitations here. We know this is a tough job.
Right.
If we get rid of him, it could go the other way. It could go backwards. So we're going to stick with the guy we think is a pretty good coach and try and figure out the resources and this new, this new day and age.
Is this the reason you're asking me about Steve Forbes? Because we don't want to address, you don't want another opinion about what's going on in the Orange?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to get to that.
I was just checking to see where the water was, how deep the water was on this. Look, I think it's more important than ever that if you make a change, okay, for a lot of reasons, but maybe roster management being the most important, if you're going to make a change, you probably need to have an idea of where you're going to go when you make the change. How's that? Like, Steve Forbes, to me, is a really good basketball coach. Is Wake Forest handcuffed financially? Maybe so. I don't know that to be true, so it's hard for me to validate it. They've got good players. Juke Harris is a really good player. I like Nate Calmese. I think they've done a nice job there. Miles Colvin is a good player. I like the young freshmen they brought in, guys like that. The Sebastian Akins kid who's filled in for Calmese has had some moments. Schwieger, the kid from, I guess it's Valpo, who's played there, he's a good player. But for me, the guy who they probably have to worry about, like leaving at the end of the regular season, is Juke Harris, because he's had games of 20-plus against the ACC a half dozen times, I think 4 or 5 for sure. Steve Forbes, good basketball coach. You got to keep your team healthy. Your evaluations become more critical the tighter your budget is, Steve, in my opinion. And will they keep him because of money? Sure they will. It wouldn't be different than what Florida State basically said they were going to do, right? They kept Mike Norvell because of money. And look, you have to be careful with your money. It's not just money going to the players. Think about how many millions of dollars change hands when you change a staff out. And, equated to the NFL where John Harbaugh wanted $20 million a year and 10 for staff. That's a lot of dollars. And the college level, it's not going to be that high, I guess. Maybe one day we'll get there. But for me, I think ADs and universities and other institutions have to think about those changes ahead of time, maybe more so than are we going to make the change? And once you decide you are, then you have to have a plan of what your next change is going to be too.
All right, let's move on to Coach Autry. As you just
I figured we'd get there at some point, but yeah, I mean, you guys have heard from you guys when Tim sent me the note. I thought, okay, well, they've talked to everybody, so now they're going to ask me. How's that?
Yeah. What are your take on his tenure here, and what do you think they should do moving forward?
Well, I'd like to know more about the change in the landscape of the institution first. Red has obviously taken the job when Jim retired. I know how emotional this is for both of those guys in particular, and I'm sure a lot of people who are Syracuse fans of all kinds, those that went to Newhouse and the other ones I don't know, right? I know how the passion rolls up there, and I respect it, and I think it's great for the ACC. But if you're going to do something here, you better have an idea what you're going to do, and you better have a plan and be able to execute the plan timely because of the roster situation. Here's the other thing I would ask you guys. You're in a time of change up there, and not just basketball potentially. You got a new AD. You're going to have a new chancellor. All those things are coming into play. How's the alignment going to work if the two people who are coming in there haven't been involved in the move here? How does that work for you guys? I mean, what is the general public feel on that? What's the feel of the AD and the chancellor going to be if those changes are made? And by the way, then they get hired.
I think it goes back to answer your question, Wes, I think it goes back to if you're going to make a move, you know what you're going to do. And I think, Paulie and I are on the same page with this. We believe they know who the next chancellor is going to be, and they're moving quickly with the AD search. So my guess is they're probably going to have both in place, even if it's just behind the scenes, by mid-March, I would think.
If that's the case, then you're free to make the move that you want to make if you feel desired to do so for basketball. And I've heard all the names that you guys have talked about and others have about, I started seeing this stuff, it feels like a month ago. But, I understand it's also a tricky situation. There's a lot of heritage there. It's much like when, Roy Williams retired, guys. I mean, the immediate candidates were all Carolina guys, right? And I know that they're talking about speculation about guys who are outside the program and things like that. For me, I think that's unfair to Red. He deserves to finish it out a little bit. But at the same time, too, I understand that, the landscape has also changed. And if you don't know what the landscape has changed to or what it can change to, then that's also going to affect who's interested in your product, too. And by product, I mean candidate for the job, because that's going to determine the money you're going to pay, not just the coach and his staff, but the players' payroll is going to determine who your pool is for maybe the head coaching job itself.
Wes, I know your time is precious. I don't want to take too much of it here, but I do want to follow up just on the coaching question with you about, one thing that we've been talking a lot about on our show is the in the family hire versus the outside the family hire. There's a faction of the fan base that is saying you can't go to the Jim Boeheim coaching tree, and there's another faction of the fan base saying Mike Hopkins, Jerry McNamara, they're both, they both should get looked at for this job. Do you have a strong feeling about that topic? Do you have a strong feeling about any of the names you've been hearing, whether it's Hop, GMAC, or outside the family with somebody like Brian Hodgson?
Is this where Paulie, Steve is leaning on me for the fact I grew up around Carolina as much as the fact that he's asking me about Syracuse? Your question's fair, first of all, and I think it's a fair discussion to have. And if you've been a Syracuse fan a long time, you know how this can impact across all borders, right? I mean, this is just not a singular conversation. This is a conversation where, but Steve and Paulie, here's the other part too. You got to get it right. Okay. Yeah. You can do whatever you want to do, but you got to get it right. And when I say get it right, not win the press conference, get it right. I'm talking about you're hiring a coach, get it right. And that's a tough one here. That's a tough one. Because the people you're talking about within the family, so to speak, Steve, they know all the hurdles. They already know. Jerry McNamara may want the job. Jerry McNamara knows what the problems are at Syracuse. So my questions for Jerry McNamara in an interview are going to be different than the ones for Brian Hodgson. Now, Brian Hodgson's been at was at Arkansas State, 2 years? Is that right?
A couple of years, yeah.
He's now 1 year at USF, and I happen to know, I don't know him, but I know of him. Brian was at USF. He's first year at USF. He's done a nice job in the American. In 2 years at Arkansas State, he did a nice job there. And, of course, he was with Nate at Buffalo and obviously at Alabama. For me, Brian Hodgson, he's from Olean, right? Is that right? Have I been?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
He would know some of the things, but he wouldn't know the things Jerry knows. Fair? Hop would know. Yeah. Hop would know legacies here. Hop would have an idea of exactly what it is, where it is, how it formed, who's responsible for its origination, and might have to be brushed up on who's managing it right now, type thing problems. Now, I think that creates a really wide swath for whoever the administration and front line is to go and find a new basketball coach if they feel that's the way to do it. It's a tough decision. For me, I would see where Jerry's value would be higher than the others, to be honest, if that's what you want to do. That may be too close for some. Too close. People want to have a further break. They want to get away from it. They want to go all the way to Brian Hodgson, who didn't go to school there, who is from the area, who might want to get back. I heard, was it Josh Shears, the coach at St. Louis, also involved? Is that right?
Yes,
that's a
correct.
name speculated. Is he from Central New York, I'm guessing?
I think he's just a hot name right now.
Okay.
That everybody's after.
Well, then you're really going to have to get him locked in, because he may just say, well, at Syracuse, it's a great brand. I grew up watching, Carmelo play, what have you. So you got to take him in and say, okay, here's what we're battling. Here's where we think we can be good. That's really what comes down to this. I've talked to enough guys who've sat in a room to be head coaches with ADs and presidents and search firms and all the others who tell me that at the end of the day, it comes down to pluses and minuses. Now, familiarity for me at a place like Syracuse would be really, really important. If I were making the hire, familiarity would be a critical quality to have, because you know the kind of players you're capable of getting. But that's where the differential, Stephen Paulie, clips in, because the differential becomes, what's the financial end of this now? Because trust me, every school in the country, no matter who you think they are and how powerful they are or how much money they have, ultimately it comes down to, is the dollar fit right for the player we think this is? Because some people go in that room from the player's side or representative side and think their player is worth a whole hell of a lot more than people are willing to pay, and they go somewhere else. Maybe they find it, maybe they don't, but they don't take the big brand offer because they don't think the big brand values them enough, and they think school X will. And that's the trickiest part of basketball right now for me.
Yeah. Shirt's, by the way, from Brooklyn. So he's a New York City guy, but
That's
doesn't
4
necessarily
hours
have
away,
ties to
Steve.
Central New York.
It's 4
Yeah,
hours.
right.
Yeah. Okay. 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that, Paulie. I've never driven it. Paulie, is it in fact 4 hours? I know you've driven it.
Yeah. I mean, you get that city traffic, it's a little long.
I just drove it this past weekend. Drove my daughter back to. She's working in New York City right now as a second grade teacher, and I just made that drive. It was 4 hours on the nose.
God bless her, Steve.
Yes.
And she's doing that's awesome.
Yes, I appreciate that, Wes. We appreciate your time. One final thought, Paul.
Yeah, and it's not Delta Airlines' fault at all, but you didn't get to hear the artist of the day is Tears for Fears. I predicted before you came on that you would be a Tears for Fears fan. Are you a Tears for Fears fan?
I'm okay with Tears for Fears. Roland Orzabal was the lead singer. I do remember that.
Yes, yeah. Look at that,
Do I
Steve.
get points for that?
Dropping some knowledge. Yes, you do.
I've seen him in concert a couple times. I'm a big 80s new wave guy. So.
Yeah. Yes, we know that about you.
Paulie, am I going to see you Tuesday night in Louisville? No chance.
Yes, I will be there.
Wow. Going to drive it?
Yeah. Oh, man, I don't know if you know this.
Going to put the wheels in motion to the Commonwealth of Kentucky? All right.
Yeah, I'll be there Sunday. Probably I'll leave Sunday.
He's gonna miss this fine radio show on Monday because of it.
I don't have to take calls on firing people for a day. It'll be nice. Nice break.
He's looking for any reason he can to get out of here, Wes, just so he can have a day off from the show.
I didn't realize till now how much being a sports talk show host is like being a bartender. Just people call and complain to you for no reason, and you have to just listen to it.
If you ever get tired of it, you can always look on Twitter too. That's a fun thing. You can just look on Twitter to see people complain. So,
trust me.
all right. Thanks, guys.
Right,
I appreciate the invite.
We love
Sorry to be
having you.
late. Yep. Take care. Anytime.
No. Thanks for the time.
You bet.
All right.
See you soon.
The great Wes Durham joining us here on the show. And with that, we'll open up the phone lines, 315-437-7644. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.